Good morning to you all. So nice we have a good fall day out there. I like them. Today's reading is from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you tie a symbol in your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Here ends the reading.
Don't leave. I'm not preaching. You're in for a treat this morning. We do have a guest speaker. Dr. Michael Moss is the Dean of the College of Biblical Studies and Behavioral Sciences at Ohio Valley University. Prior to that, he was the Dean of the College in Bible and Ministry at Lipscomb University, where I had the honor of studying under Dr. Moss. Prior to that, he was my preacher when I was a little tyke in Louisville, Kentucky. Closely related to that, his wife Jenny is with us this morning and was one of my Sunday school teachers when we were in Kentucky. Feel free not to ask her any questions about that. As Hannah was melting down in the pew sitting next to Miss Jenny, I could see the look on her face, and the look was, well, she's acting just like her father used to. So the apple does not fall far from the tree. But thank you both for taking your time to come over and speak with us and to fellowship with us. So, Dr. Moss, I will turn it over to you.
I thought perhaps I should begin by just saying a bit about what's happening at OVU. So I'm going to begin with a commercial, and then we'll move from there to our study this morning. We're really grateful to have Dr. Harold Shank with us as our new president. He's doing a wonderful job. We've made significant progress since he's taken over. Things are in the right direction. Finances are better than they've ever been. We're growing the school in ways that we think it ought to go, and we're just really, really pleased with what's happening. But I thought you might see just a bit of the data about what's happening. One of the things that's significant is we are Tier 1 again. It's really significant. Each year we'll rank various schools in the United States and 4 universities in the United States, and they're going to rank the colleges and universities from number 1 down all the way down. It's really interesting because the best known of these ranking companies is the U.S. World Report, and for the 6th year in a row, we have again been ranked in the top tier of universities. There's a Tier 1, a Tier 2, and a Tier 3, and for 6 years in a row, we have been Tier 1. And we're really quite proud of that. They really have been giving us significant rankings. The ranking shows, again, those 3 groups of analysis. OVU again ranks in the top, and we have ranked there for 6 years in a row. This year they moved us up to number 27 out of 120 schools in the South. Now we're considered a southern school. We're sort of the northernmost southern school, or the northern school. I'm not sure which way those, but they put us in this grouping of southern schools, and so that's really important. Also, the Washington Monthly ranks schools. They rank about 1,600 schools in America, and they will rank those schools. And one of the qualities for which they rank schools is how well they help folks who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And because so many of our students come from Appalachia, that's really significant because we're deemed to be doing a very good job. They also rank schools in terms of another key issue is how well we focus on service. And interestingly enough, out of those 1,600 schools, we're ranked number 1 in terms of putting our students in service to the community roundabout, and that's significant. We are, again, one of about 350 colleges that made the top rankings in their setting. They chose 350, and we're ranked number 36. And that's 350 in the whole nation that they're ranking, and we're number 36 in that listing. And we're really quite proud of that, so that's really significant. There have been some significant changes on campus. If President Schenck were to take you on campus, he would take you to our building, to the Johnson Center for Biblical Studies, and he would show off some of the things that have been done there in the past few years. We have several classrooms that have been renovated during the past summer, and that's significant. With funds that I raised and funds that were raised in Nashville and Memphis last year in 2012, we've completely redone some of the classrooms in our building, and the pictures on the next slide will show you some of that. That's 3 of the classrooms that have been completely renovated, painted, new carpet, new tables, the latest technology, and we're really, really quite proud of that. We're the only section of the school where every room has high technology, and we're really proud of the fact that we've been able to do that. And so that's significant, I think. I entitled our lesson this morning, Always God's Plan for Parenting. And I thought, since we're talking about Christian education, we really need to go to the heart of that. And I really think it's the family which is the heart of Christian education. The text that we're going to be looking at is the one we read together just a few moments ago. It is Shema Yisrael. And I'm going to teach you a little Hebrew this morning. So here we go, a little Hebrew. It will begin with that interesting word Shema. And so here's the first line. Shema, O Yisrael, hear, O Israel. And then it goes on, Echav Adonai, the Lord is our God. And then the next line is Adonai Echad, and that is the Lord is one. This text is really quite important. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, and the following verses will begin with this phrase, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. It's known as the Shema. That's how a good Jew would know this text, because that's the first word in the text. And it really is, again, a significant text, and I think that's important for us. For the Jews, Deuteronomy chapter 6 is deemed to be the heart of the Old Testament, perhaps the significant passage, and it's the one there is passage that they would recite every Sabbath at the synagogue. Because the obedience is hearing the word of God, and hearing hear what it's really interesting because Jesus Mark and in Luke. These verses are addressed to the terribly important. But in particular, these verses are really addressed to parents and to, especially to fathers and to grandfathers, because their leadership is seen to be the thing that will shape the nation of Israel and give Israel its direction. If they fall down on this, everything will fall apart in the whole nation. And so that becomes so important to us. So what is to be Israel's relationship to the Lord? How are they to relate to the Lord God? It's very simple. They are to love Him totally, from heart and soul and might. With everything you've got. Put everything you have into loving me. And that becomes, I think, the heart of this text. The covenant was based on the love that God had for His people, and it required them to love the Lord in return. They had to love Him, and so it really is very much the heart of it all. That's what it's all about. Teaching about God's love of His people and the love of the people for God, and from that, their love toward their neighbors, to those round about them, is really taught throughout the Old Testament. That's a recurring theme in all of the Old Testament. We see it over and over again. Love is tied tightly to the whole idea of obedience and loyalty. If you are obeying God, you will love. It is the heart of it all. We pick up a point and read further on in the text. The word which I am commanding you today shall be your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your son. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gate. It's really quite interesting because the people are not to concern themselves only with their love for God. It really is all about that to their children. And that becomes so important for Israel. They understand they have a responsibility to God. Their responsibility also means that they're going to share that with their families. And that becomes the heart of it all. Fathers in this text are called upon to teach their children. Fathers in the Israel community talk about the commandments no matter where they are, whether they're in the home or in the way. Wherever they are to do this teaching, and that becomes the heart of this text. They're to teach these principles to them when they're in there, when they walk away, when they lie down, when they run up. Walk, rise. It does suggest teaching an always kind of thing. It's something that you do all of the time. Or just when gathered as a nation or as a people, but it's something there all of the time. It becomes the heart of it all out. We understand that B is a 5 job or a 8 job in the morning. It's not just that. Any of you who are reading is something that takes every hour of every day. You're concerned about those kids when they are at school. You're concerned about how they're being educated. But all part of who you are and who they are. It becomes so. I'll share with you a bit of my own experience working with my dad. My father passed away a year ago this past June, but one of the things that I learned to appreciate was something that came rather natural for him. As a boy, at about 6 or 7, I started going to work with my dad. My dad was a contractor. He had an electrical heating and plumbing license, and I went to work with Dad from day one. I started working with him. I'm pleased to have learned all kinds of how to fix all kinds of things because I worked with my dad. It was very much about who we were. I learned to appreciate a lot of things, though. Traveling with him and hearing him, seeing him work, really shaped to a large degree who I am. I can remember being at work with him and hearing a fellow who went to church with us use some rather foul language. And I can remember to Dad, "Dad, hear that? And my dad's response to me was, "Son, you're right. We're not going to tell him that now, but you're exactly right." And so I was learning important lessons that really became a very much part of, I think, who I am. I was asked to speak in chapel some time ago, and my topic to speak on in chapel was, "Why are you at OVU?" They had students to talk about that, and they had faculty to talk about that. I asked, "Why are you at OVU?" I said it probably is because of Mom and Dad. In particular, it's probably because of my mom and all of those Bible stories I remember hearing as a boy. One of the things we did every night before we went to hear a Bible story, we went through 6 Bible story books, read all of those stories multiple times. I remember what my favorite Bible story was. I remember all of those Bible stories. And they probably shaped me to a large degree. I'm sure I'm a preacher this day and a teacher of Bible this day because of what Mom and Dad taught me and because of how they impressed that upon me. That really is very, very important. I remember as our girls were growing up, one of the things I tried my best to do was every evening to be at home when it was time to put them to bed. Every evening when it would be time to put them to bed, we would have a Bible story, we would sing some songs, some of those Sunday school kind of songs, and have a prayer, and we did that every night without fail. I might have to go back out again, but I would always be home at bedtime for the kids. And so that was an important time for us as family. Now, as grandparents, it's kind of fun to be on the other side and to see my daughters doing that with our grandkids, and to get to babysit with those grandkids and do that again with them, to tell them the story. I remember very fondly my dad, "Don't this story to us, tell it to us, because it's more meaningful when you tell it to us. Just tell us the story." And I think there's something of that. That's what I think God was after with Israel. That's what he wanted dads and granddads in particular, but moms as well, to do with their kids. He really wanted them to tell that story so that they would know who they were. He wants them to tell them over and over again, God is the one who led us out of Egyptian bondage. And that's who we are. We are what we are because of what God has done for us. Parents and children have to spend time together. It's really unfortunate, but with our cultures the way they are today, kids go one direction, mom and dad go one direction, and in a lot of families, seldom do they sit down and eat a meal together because of the rush of time. And I think it is vital for us to do that. Although here the responsibility is passed to fathers for teaching their children, there's a clear recognition among the Jews that mothers play a part. It really has always interested me that among the Jews, if your mama is a Jew, you're a Jew. If your daddy is a Jew and your mama's not a Jew, you might be a Jew. But if your mama's a Jew, you're a Jew. Why do you think that's the case? I have a suspicion it's because the assumption is when mama is with you, she's going to be sharing with you those wonderful stories of who we are. You'll understand what it means to be a Jew if your mama's a Jew. And so that becomes really, really important. You may well remember how this will fit into the account of Timothy. Here's the text from 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5. For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice. I am sure that it is in you as well. You'll remember that our man Timothy has a Gentile daddy. His mama is a Jew, his grandma is a Jew, but Paul says, I know you're Jewish because of your mama and your grandma, because they told you those Bible stories. You understand what it means to be a man of God because of mama and grandma. And so I think our text is one of those that emphasizes the need of parents to do this parenting and to be sharing those kind of stories and how important that is. He goes on in our text to say, you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and you shall write them on your frontals of your forehead, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. That becomes really important. It would seem to me that tying these words as symbols on their hands and binding them on their foreheads may well have been given metaphorically. It's sort of like you're going to put it on you. It's going to be with you wherever you are. And I think that text may have been given almost metaphorically, but it's interesting because the Jews are going to take it very, very literally. And you'll see that as we look at these next pictures. The things that you see off to the left are mezuzahs. A mezuzah is a little box that has in it Deuteronomy chapter 6, written in beautiful Hebrew and rolled up, and it's on every door in Israel. If you go to somebody's house, it's going to be on the door. They're going to write it on the doorpost and on their gate. If you stay in a hotel in Israel, in that hotel in Israel, on every door, there'll be a mezuzah. So they're going to take it very literally. On every doorpost, there is this text. We're writing it on our doorposts. You're going to put it as a frontal on your forehead and on your arm. And here again, you'll see these tephilim or phylactery. Jesus will talk about folks who make their phylacteries broad to boast. And you see the little box on the man's head right here, and the box on his head. And there's the box that is on his arm, and there's the box on somebody's arm. It's interesting because they even had to wrap the strap a special way so that the strap would spell out Shaddai. Sin, Sheen, Daleth, Yod, those three letters are supposed to be spelled out by the way you wrap this thing around your arm, because God is El Shaddai, God is Almighty. And they're supposed to wrap the cord a special way, just so the lesson will be taught. Now, again, they take it very seriously. And Jews today, if you go to Israel, you'll see people going to worship, and they'll be dressed just like this fella down here, or like this fella here, with the box on his head and the box on his wrist, with that text written in it. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That text becomes so important to them. It is important to involve our children in worship and to really recognize that they need to be involved in a family of faith. It is vital for them to come to worship on Sunday. They're going to learn something. I guess the first time I came to a worship service was when I was probably 2 weeks old, and I've done it ever since. I've not missed any Sundays. That's something I've always done, and I think that's the kind of thing that shapes you. It makes you who you are. And that becomes so important. That's why Christian Sunday, Christian Education Sunday is important, something you do every year. You're emphasizing the need for doing this and the place that all of this will carry in their lives. I think this was very clear to the average Jew. They understood it. They took it to heart. They emphasized it. Children need to attend worship, and they need to attend Bible study frequently. It shapes them. Bringing them to church makes a difference in who they are, and it will shape what they do. They need to see their parents studying the Bible. I think that really is significant. It's interesting, we give a test every year to our incoming students to see how much Bible they know. And if they don't do well, they're put in this Bible class. If they do pretty well, they're put in this Bible class. And so we determine how much Bible they know coming in. And it's really interesting because the kids who go to Sunday school all the time will score better, but the kids who score the best are the ones whose parents read to them the Bible at home. Isn't that interesting? Sunday school shapes them, yes, but it's what's done at home that shapes them even more. That's why Christian Education Sunday needs to be something that you take seriously every day of the year as you try to help students, your children. Parents need to study with their children, to walk through the Bible with their kids, and I think that's vital. We read on. Then it shall come about when the Lord your God brings you into the land which he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you great and splendid cities which you did not build, houses full of things which you did not fill, hewn cisterns which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you eat and are satisfied. Then watch yourselves that you don't forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery. Moses gives them, after this part of the text, a real warning. The real danger is that when they get into the land and begin to enjoy these wonderful things that they didn't have a hand in growing or planting or building, they may forget him. They'll forget what he's done. And that becomes vital. The land is to be Israel's. It's the land that was promised to them before to their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The promise is about to be fulfilled in Israel's experience. This is the book of Deuteronomy, just before Joshua will lead them into the land. Moses is just about to die. In a very real way, the book of Deuteronomy is Moses' farewell to Israel, and that becomes important. It involved wealth, barns and houses and wells, cisterns, vineyards, olive groves that they hadn't provided, dug, or planted. They would eat and be satisfied, and they might forget that the Lord is their God, that the Lord had delivered them. It's unfortunate, but when we get well off, that's when we tend to forget the Lord. We take for granted the things that we have. We assume that we've built them. We've done these wonderful things. We have what we have because of us. And we fail to recognize that God is the one who gives us those things. I've been making trips to Romania now for 22 years, and one of the reasons I keep going back is the folks there are so open. They're anxious to study the Bible. We go there to teach them English using the Bible as text. A lot of them come only to improve their English so they'll get a better job, and then they get hooked on studying the Bible, which is so much fun to get to see them hooked on studying the Bible. And the folks that I studied the Bible with initially are now some leaders in the church, and it's been fun to go back and see that kind of growth. But one of the reasons I'm going all of the time is the economy there has been very, very bad. The average income for a person might be $60 a month initially when we first went. It's now up to maybe $100 a month. But it's climbing, and as they get more and more wealthy, I think the more and more likely it is that they're going to forget God and not want to hear from God. Right now they're open. And so I'm anxious to do that, and I think that's an important lesson for us to learn. It sounds a little like the situation in which we live today. We are a very fortunate family, a very fortunate group of people. You shall fear only the Lord your God, and you shall worship him and swear by his name. You shall not follow other gods, any of the gods of the peoples who surround you. For the Lord your God is in the midst of you. He's a jealous God. Otherwise, the anger of the Lord your God will be kindled against you, and he will wipe you off the face of the earth. The warnings continue. Notice he is the Lord your God, and you need to understand the significance of that. Again, you'll notice he uses this word jealousy, and we find that word jealousy almost as a negative here, but he is somebody who really cares about us and wants what's best for us. That becomes vital in our text. Biblical history shows that such provocations frustrate the love of God until he can no longer be patient with them, and he will turn his back on them. The people must adhere to the Lord their God so that it may go well with them, so that they may thrust out the enemies from the good land. If they do not devote themselves to him, fear him, serve him, speak of him daily in their relationships, take their oaths in his name, instead of following after the other gods, his jealous anger will destroy them as a nation, and that kind of becomes important. It's interesting, Jesus also cites this passage when he's being tempted by the devil. It's a lesson that he learned that Israel didn't learn. I want to kind of close with this quote from President Wilson when he was the president of Princeton University. Now, this is interesting. Parents were coming to him, and the parents will complain to him about what's happening with their kids at university at Princeton. Here's the quote. I get many letters from you parents about your children. You want to know why we people up here in Princeton can't make more out of them and do more for them. Let me tell you the reason we can't. It may shock you just a little, but I am not trying to be rude. The reason is that they are your sons, reared in your homes, blood of your blood and bone of your bone. They have absorbed the ideals of your homes. They have formed and fashioned, you have formed and fashioned them. They are your sons. In those malleable, moldable years of their lives, you have forever left your imprint on them. Is that not an interesting comment? Why don't you turn these kids around? Why don't you make them better? Because you've already shaped them. And that becomes, I think, a really important lesson for those of us who are parents and grandparents who have a role in children's lives to take very seriously. It is important. Teaching our children is a never-ending task. It never, ever is done. We are always we're always just one generation away from complete apostasy. And we hear that over and over. I think it is true. Fathers cannot exclude themselves from the task. And I think it's unfortunate, but those of us who are fathers often want to pass that off to mom. That's mom's responsibility. Let mom teach the kids. And here he gives the responsibility to fathers. If it's not done, the fathers are the ones who are going to be held responsible. They must take it seriously. And so it is an important lesson for us to learn. We call this Christian Education Sunday. Dr. Shank has already got you on his calendar for next year, so he'll be here next year. He couldn't come this year, but he'll be with you for sure next year and get to share a lesson with you. But I think it's important to do what you're doing. Emphasizing Christian education is important. That's who we're about at OVU. We try to teach these young people, but to a large degree, they're shaped when they come to us. It's interesting because last year, by this time of the year, we'd had 13 baptisms. I'm not sure how many we've had this year, but by this time of the year last year, we had 13 baptisms of students already. Folks who come to us who aren't Christians, who are taught primarily, interestingly enough, not by those of us who are Bible teachers, but by their colleagues. And so it's important to do that and to share that kind of message. It's good to be with you and to share with you these kind of words. We're going to sing a song that's been announced as an invitation song. We've not talked about what you need to do to become a Christian. I think you know that. You perhaps have heard that wonderful lesson time and time again, that Jesus indeed died for you on the cross, that he gave his life, and that you indeed can become his child, to be buried in baptism, to walk in newness of life because of that wonderful gift. Perhaps there are those who need to respond for prayer, and we'd be glad to pray with you if you have that kind of need. For all of us, I think we need to go home and think about the responsibility that we have to our young people, sharing the good news, and being good parents and grandparents. May God bless us. Let's stand as we sing, please.